They're calling you a monster. Do you understand what that word means? Your linguistic database translates it as one who commits acts of profound evil. Yes, Defender Vance, I comprehend the accusation. Stop calling me Defender. My name is Kira, and I need you to understand something before we step into that courtroom. I didn't volunteer for this. Nobody wanted to represent you. The Interstellar Court of Justice assigned me because every defendant, even you, deserves legal counsel. Even monsters? I didn't say you were a monster. They did. But you believe it. I can detect the elevation in your cortisol levels when you're near me. Fear, disgust, perhaps hatred. Your biology betrays what your words attempt to conceal. 847 people died on Mars Colony 7. Men, women, children. You killed them. So yes, forgive me if I'm not comfortable sitting across from you in a 5 by 5 meter holding cell. I did not kill them. Don't start with denial. The evidence is overwhelming. Surveillance footage, DNA samples, testimony from the survivors. You were there. You did this. I was there. I performed the actions, but I did not kill them. Your language is imprecise. Imprecise? You want to argue semantics while the families of your victims are outside demanding your execution? I am arguing comprehension, not semantics. There is a difference. In my language, in my culture, the concept you call killing does not exist in the form you understand it. That's absurd. Death is death. It's universal. Is it? Tell me, Kira Vance, when you consume the flesh of animals, do you consider yourself a murderer? That's different. That's survival. That's different how? You end a consciousness to sustain your own. My people have a word for what I did. Transcription. We do not view physical forms as permanent. We see them as temporary vessels for consciousness. So what? You thought you were helping them? Is that your defense? You murdered nearly 1,000 people because you thought you were doing them a favor? I did not murder them. I transcribed them. I transferred their consciousness to what we call the continuum. In my culture, this is the highest honor. It is liberation from physical suffering. They didn't ask to be liberated. They didn't consent. Does a child consent to birth? Does an infant consent to learning language? Some transitions occur whether or not consent is given because they are necessary for evolution. You're comparing mass murder to education? Are you insane by your own species standards, or is this normal for you? I am not insane. I am a facilitator. For 600 cycles, I have served my people by helping them transcend their physical limitations. When I arrived at your Mars colony, I believed I was offering you the same gift. A gift? You call it a gift? What else would you call the removal of pain, of disease, of aging, of death itself? I'd call it murder, Zix, because unlike your people, we don't want to be transcribed. We value our physical existence. We fear death. We mourn the dead. These are fundamental aspects of being human. Then your species is trapped in primitive thinking. You cling to biology like prisoners embracing their chains. And there it is, the arrogance, the assumption that your way is superior. That's what the prosecution is going to hammer. You didn't just kill humans, you dismissed our entire way of life as inferior. Is it not inferior? Your people suffer from diseases we eliminated millennia ago. You age and deteriorate. You watch loved ones die. You live in constant awareness of your own mortality. How is this not suffering? Because it's our suffering, our choice. You don't get to decide for us. Why not? When you discovered fire, did you ask the cold if it wished to remain? When you invented medicine, did you ask diseases for permission to eradicate them? Progress does not pause for the consent of the obsolete. Listen to yourself. You sound like every tyrant in human history, every dictator who justified atrocities in the name of progress. And you sound like every primitive culture that resisted advancement out of fear. Tell me, Kira Vance, do you mourn the extinction of smallpox? Do you weep for the eradication of polio? Those were diseases, not people. From my perspective, biological limitation is the disease, physical death is the symptom. I was attempting to cure you.
By force, without permission. That's the part you keep ignoring.
Because permission is irrelevant when the benefit is absolute. If a human child is drowning, do you ask permission before saving them, or do you act, knowing the child cannot comprehend the danger?
We weren't drowning. We were living.
You were dying, slowly, painfully, inevitably. All biological life is dying from the moment of conception. I merely accelerated the transition to something better.
And what about the survivors? The ones who watched you transcribe their families. They describe something horrific. Bodies dissolving into light, screams that still haunt them. How is that better?
The screams were involuntary neural responses to rapid consciousness transfer. The dissolution was the physical form releasing its hold on the consciousness within. What they witnessed was metamorphosis, not destruction. They witnessed horror, trauma, genocide. They witnessed the birth of something transcendent. Their limited perception interpreted advancement as atrocity. You keep saying transcended. Where did they go? Where are these consciousnesses now? In the continuum, a dimension beyond physical space where consciousness exists in pure form, free from biological constraints, free from suffering.
Can you prove this? Can you show me evidence that anyone you've transcribed still exists?
Can you prove that death leads to oblivion? You have faith in your beliefs about mortality. I have knowledge of mine.
Faith and knowledge are not the same thing.
Are they not? You cannot prove what happens to consciousness after biological death, yet you structure your entire society around assumptions about it. How is my certainty different from your faith?
Because my faith doesn't involve killing people to prove it.
Your species has engaged in countless religious wars, sacrifices, and martyrdoms based on unprovable beliefs about the afterlife. Do not pretend your hands are clean.
That's historical context.
We've evolved past that. Have you? Then why do you still cling to biological existence as if it were sacred? Why do you resist the next step in consciousness evolution?
Because evolution requires choice. Adaptation requires consent. You can't force enlightenment on people who don't want it.
I disagree. Sometimes evolution requires a catalyst, a disruptor, someone willing to push beyond the accepted boundaries of thinking.
A catalyst. Is that how you see yourself? Some kind of evolutionary prophet?
I see myself as inevitable. My people transcended physical form 40,000 of your years ago. We exist across multiple dimensions. We have watched countless species struggle with the transition from biological to post-biological existence. Most fail. They destroy themselves before achieving transcendence. I was trying to help humanity avoid that fate.
By deciding for us, by removing our choice.
Yes, because given the choice, most biological entities choose familiar suffering over unfamiliar liberation. They choose the comfort of their chains.
Then let them choose their chains. That's what freedom means.
Freedom to suffer is not freedom. It is delusion masquerading as autonomy.
And forced salvation is not salvation. It's tyranny wearing a benevolent mask.
We are at an impasse, Defender Vance. You view my actions through the lens of human morality. I view your resistance through the lens of evolutionary inevitability. Neither of us can convince the other.
Then what happens in court tomorrow? You'll tell the judges this philosophy and they'll execute you. The entire solar system wants you dead. Multiple species have filed briefs supporting maximum punishment. You'll be the first being ever executed under interstellar law.
Death holds no fear for me.
Physical termination is merely another form of transcription. If they destroy this body, my consciousness will return to the continuum. I will simply exist in a different state. Convenient, a belief system where you can't lose. Or perhaps a truth that transcends your limited perception. Tell me, Kira Vance, why did you truly accept this case? I told you I was assigned. No, you could have refused, faced professional sanction, certainly, but you had the option, yet you accepted. Why? Because even monsters deserve representation. You keep using that word, but I detect uncertainty in your biometrics when you say it. You are not certain I am a monster. Part of you wonders if I might be something else entirely. Don't presume to read my thoughts. I am not reading thoughts. I am reading data. Your heart rate increases when discussing certain aspects of the case. Your breathing becomes shallow when I describe the continuum. These are not signs of absolute conviction. These are signs of doubt.
Doubt about what?
Doubt about whether the universe you inhabit is the only valid reality. Doubt about whether biological existence is the pinnacle of consciousness. Doubt about whether I am a criminal or simply the first ambassador from a form of life you cannot yet comprehend.
Even if any of that were true, it doesn't excuse what you did. Understanding isn't absolution.
I am not seeking absolution. I am seeking acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that different forms of consciousness operate under different moral frameworks. What is murder to you is transcription to me. What is horror to you is liberation to me.
That's moral relativism, and it's a dangerous path.
More dangerous than the certainty that your way is the only way? Throughout human history, that certainty has caused more suffering than any relativism ever could.
So what's your point? That we should just accept what you did? Say, oh well, different cultures, different rules, and let you go?
I am saying that if humanity wishes to join the greater community of conscious beings across the galaxy, you must learn to understand that consciousness itself is diverse, that morality is not universal, that what seems like evil from one perspective may be compassion from another.
That's moral relativism, and it's a dangerous path.
More dangerous than the certainty that your way is the only way? Throughout human history, that certainty has caused more suffering than any relativism ever could.
So what's your point? That we should just accept what you did? Say, oh well, different cultures, different rules, and let you go?
I am saying that if humanity wishes to join the greater community of conscious beings across the galaxy, you must learn to understand that consciousness itself is diverse, that morality is not universal, that what seems like evil from one perspective may be compassion from another.
And if I argue that in court? If I stand before the judges and say, ladies and gentlemen, my client committed mass murder, but from his perspective, it was actually a kindness, they'll laugh me out of the chamber.
Perhaps, or perhaps they will be forced to confront an uncomfortable truth that the universe is far stranger and more complex than your laws can account for, that justice itself may be a cultural construct rather than an absolute principle.
You're asking me to defend the indefensible.
I am asking you to defend the incomprehensible. There is a difference.
The families of the victims won't see a difference. To them, you're a killer, period.
And to my people, I am a hero who attempted to enlighten a primitive species. Both truths exist simultaneously. Both are valid from their respective frameworks.
That's not how justice works.
Then perhaps justice needs to evolve, just as consciousness evolves, just as civilizations evolve, just as your species must evolve if it wishes to survive contact with beings like me.
Beings like you. How many others are out there? How many other species think the way you do?
more than you imagine, and they are watching this trial with great interest because the verdict you render will determine how they interact with humanity going forward. Execute me, and you declare yourselves a violent, primitive species unready for true interstellar contact. Find me innocent, and you acknowledge the possibility of moral frameworks beyond your own.
That's a hell of a burden to place on one trial.
First contact always carries burden. Your species has been fortunate that I was the first to arrive. Others would have been far less gentle.
Gentle. You killed 847 people, and you call that gentle?
Compared to what others would have done, yes, some species view humans as resources to be exploited. Others see you as pests to be eliminated. I saw you as potential, as beings worthy of elevation. That is why I acted.
Even if I believed any of this, even if I accepted your twisted logic, how do I make a jury understand it? How do I convince them that you deserve anything other than death?
By asking them a simple question: is ignorance a crime? I did not understand that humans view transcription as murder. I acted according to my cultural values, not out of malice. Should misunderstanding be punishable by death? Ignorance isn't an excuse when the consequences are this severe. Then every human who has ever misunderstood another culture is guilty. Every explorer who violated indigenous customs, every diplomat who caused offense through unfamiliarity. By your logic, cultural misunderstanding is criminal.
Those examples didn't result in mass casualties.
Only because the misunderstandings were smaller on scale, but the principle is identical. I am guilty of catastrophic cultural misunderstanding, not murder.
The prosecution will argue you had access to human databases, that you could have learned our customs before acting.
I did access your databases. I studied human philosophy, religion, and culture, but I interpreted it through my framework of understanding. I saw your fear of death as something to be overcome, not respected. I saw your attachment to physical form as limitation, not preference. I misread your species. That is my crime.
847 people are dead because of your misreading.
They are not dead, they are transformed. But I understand now that you cannot perceive the difference. That is my failure, not malice, not evil. Failure to comprehend an alien perspective.
If I use that defense, do you know what will happen? They'll say you're too dangerous to exist, that any being who can commit atrocity through misunderstanding cannot be allowed to interact with humanity.
Then you face an impossible choice, Defender Vance. Argue that I understood my actions and I am a murderer who deserves execution. Argue that I misunderstood and I am too dangerous to live. Either way, I am condemned, as perhaps I should be. What? I have been contemplating your perspective during our conversations, attempting to see through human eyes, and I am beginning to understand something troubling. From your viewpoint, intention may not matter. Results matter. I ended lives you valued, regardless of my reasons. Perhaps that alone is sufficient for judgment.
Are you changing your stance? Accepting guilt?
I am accepting complexity. I am neither innocent nor guilty in absolute terms. I am a being from a radically different reality attempting to interact with yours, and in that interaction, I caused harm. Whether that harm was intentional or not may be less relevant than the fact that it occurred.
So what do you want me to argue tomorrow?
The truth. That I am not a monster, but I am dangerous. That I am not evil, but I am incompatible with human existence. That the universe contains forms of consciousness so alien that interaction itself may be harmful, regardless of intent.
That's not a defense. That's a confession.
Perhaps confession is the only honest defense I have. I cannot claim innocence by human standards. I can only claim difference. Whether that difference deserves death or understanding is for your species to decide.
The judges will want a recommendation. Life imprisonment, exile, execution. What sentence do you think fits your crime?
I think humanity should quarantine my species, prevent us from further contact until your civilization has evolved sufficiently to interact with post-biological consciousness. That may take millennia, but it is the only way to prevent future tragedies like Mars Colony 7.
You're suggesting exile for your entire species because of your actions?
I am suggesting that contact between radically different forms of consciousness requires preparation. Your species is not prepared. Mine is arrogant. The combination is catastrophic. Better to wait.
And what happens to you?
That is less important than what happens to future encounters between our peoples. I am one being. The principles established by this trial will affect billions. Focus on the larger question, Defender Vance. Is coexistence possible between beings who cannot share basic assumptions about life, death, and consciousness? Or must the universe be divided into zones of compatible reality?
I don't know.
I honestly don't know. Then argue that uncertainty. Argue that this case reveals the limitations of current interstellar law, that justice designed for similar species cannot adjudicate conflicts between fundamentally alien forms of consciousness. Argue for delay, for study, for time to develop frameworks that can account for beings like me. The victims' families want closure. They want justice now. And they deserve it. But what justice means in this context is unclear. I have harmed them by any definition, but whether that harm was criminal or tragic or simply inevitable collision between incompatible realities, that question has no easy answer.
10 minutes until we're called to court. Final question 6. If you could go back, knowing what you know now about human perspective, would you still have transcribed those colonists?
No, not because transcription is wrong, but because the harm it caused to your species outweighs any potential benefit. I would have waited, studied longer, approached differently, or not approached at all.
That's the first thing you've said that sounds like actual remorse.
It is remorse by my understanding, regret for harm caused, even if the action was well-intentioned. Is that not the definition?
Close enough. All right, let's go face judgment. And 6, whatever happens in there, thank you for finally being honest with me.
The honor is mine, Defender Vance. You have shown me that understanding between incompatible minds is possible, even if agreement is not. That alone makes this trial worthwhile.
We'll see if the judges agree. Come on, time to make history, one way or another.